So, response to the guy with Pepe the Frog as his icon thumbnail. This is what I'm talking about. This is why I had to do the whole history thing. After I did, when man spread out, I also did spread out of cultures from the river, the Tigris and Euphrates, and the Fertile Crescent. You had the Greek Isles and Anatolia, and then you had it spreading to Egypt along the Nile, and the Indus River, and then Yangtze, the Po Valley, spreading out that way. But after Rome fell, after Rome, that voluntarily became Christian, fell, and the Dark Ages came, that was induced by the pagans, who destroyed everything, and they slowly had to be re-Christianized. But there was one place where Christianity stood, and the Dark Ages basically didn't affect it, and that was Ireland, that peaceably became Christian over one generation, the entire Ireland. With Christianity comes writing and the preservation of all past works. There is no burning of books. This is why we have the sagas of the Vikings when they became Christian. This is why we have all of Greek literature and all of ancient Roman literature. Is it kept getting copied down? There was no eraser taken to things. That form of hostile iconoclastic Christianity only came about in England about 450 years ago, right? With the radical Protestants, Henry VIII destroying entire monasteries, destroying entire reliquaries, or destroying all these very important archaeological things. The Christians didn't even take down the pagan temples. How long was Egypt Christian for? Before it was taken over by the Muslims, and it was the Muslims that scarred the nose of the Sphinx. And the Northern Irish, which were the Scots, the Scotty, began to Scottish-ize Pictland, which is what we now call Scotland. And the chieftains saw, oh my gosh, there's a advantage here because it brings in writing, which brings with it mathematics, philosophy, architecture. You could build roads, you could build everything much better, and it preserves things to the next generation. So you don't have to rely on these long tales, these long, as the Celts used to, these long oral poems. Basically every prehistoric, pre-writing society had to do. And also Christianity, it got rid of human sacrifice. It meant one law for all. And that it kept dying and emerging again. I preserved all the ancient stuff. It meant one law for all, no more human sacrifice. The idea of that you're responsible for your fellow man, and that the worship of God is intrinsically tied to moral behavior. Right? Now, the church kept trying to rein this in because remember, this is between people like Clovis then becoming Christian, one of the Franks, and then having to deal with the people like the Vikings that had no connection with morality and religion. It was just kill and destroy, attack soft targets, no idea of honor and nobility and that kind of stuff from them. They had it, but it was what we would consider twisted, because our modern day morals are Christian morals. Western values are directly out of Christianity. And once you take away that main block, that supernatural block, the rest of those things that I stated in the video previously such as morals, customs, rituals, worldview, sense of the sacred, and honor. Those get wiped out. Okay, let's look at when we're staring into postmodernism, when we're staring into nihilism. Well, supernatural, that's wiped out. Rituals basically have already eroded. Customs are going now. Sense of the sacred, that's almost largely secularized. So we don't have that in common anymore. And even our sense of honor and morals are gone. Look at the nihilistic comedy of things like Family Guy, right? Which I used to watch until it became just sickening. But you have this ever increasing degradation. And yeah, Christendom, it's not like Christendom gave us 97% of all of the advancements in science, philosophy, law, religion, like ethics, morals, not religion, metaphysics. It's not like that sprang out of Christendom, right? And even the people who oppose those things, right, like the separation of church and state, well, that's intrinsic in the New Testament. Render unto Caesar what's Caesar's, and even Paul goes into that, not just Christ, but Paul goes into this thing of no, there's the rulers, who cares about them? They get given a sword to rule. Um, and then but even the reactionaries to those, it's not like Hume could have sprung up. Someone like David Hume, he couldn't have sprung up in China or pre-colonial India or the middle of Africa. I don't even want to call it Congo yet. Pre-colonial Africa. Now, don't get me wrong. Before the colonists made contact with India and China, they were advanced to a certain point. But the funny thing is, with Christianity, where do you find wherever Christianity goes, writing goes. That's why, I mean, that's one of the reasons that Mormonism is so obviously a con. Not to mention that all of the flora and fauna that most of the flora and fauna that Joseph Smith mentions is all old world. He had no concept that there were no horses here, that there was no barley or wheat here, that there were no elephants here. I don't care if they say, oh, but there were mammoths. No, no, no. And there were no sheep or oxen, anything like that. That's why the Americas, it was a corn-based civilization with some rices, but mainly corn and deer. And in the South, it was tapir and llama, right? But wherever Christianity went, whether it was Ethiopia, whether it was India, and remember, these places got cut off by the Islamic Caliphate from connection with Europe. Europeans had to stumble back across them. They had forgotten these groups were even around. They had a legend of Prester John was going to save them because they knew of Ethiopia and India were Christian, that there were Christian kingdoms there at once, but they didn't. Was they still around? Hopefully, Prester John will come up from the south or the east and liberate us, because there were the five princes of India that were Christian, and Ethiopia was Christian long before England was Christian. You had Christianity was in Britain, yeah, but guess what? The Angles, the Saxons, and Jutes came in and annihilated the people, and Wales had to stave them off. That's why there weren't many martyrs in Wales, because they didn't want to consider men who died in battle defending the church martyrs. It just wasn't in their thought process, so they would carry the cross into battle and fight off these Saxon invaders. The Saxons eventually became Christian. Why? Because of the Pictish chieftains becoming Christian and accepting the culture, being Scottishized, and the influence from the continent, because people like Clovis and Charlemagne. I think no, by the time of Charlemagne, England was already Christian and yeah, Lindisfarne had already been hit by the Viking, the first of the Viking raids that we know of. But yeah, so you want to argue against Western values and not, I mean, I don't know what people consider Western anymore, because technically Western would still include Islam, but I'll just say Christendom's values. Yes, the Aztecs were so much morally superior than, the Spanish. And when Columbus came over, remember on his first voyage, maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but the men, some of them saw how badly he treated these people and that he wanted to enslave them. And this wasn't a Christian idea. Christianity did not like slavery and had ended it 3 times. And they actually went back and became priests. De las Casas is one of them who came back and defended the natives against the savage people like Columbus, who had gotten the slave trade from the Arabs in the Reconquista of Spain. So where does your argument map on that? See, that's why I was trying to make an 11-part series for people like you who will just jump all over the place. All right, peace to you. And may God save the Syriacs, Antiochian, Maronite, Melkite, and Latin Rite, as well as the Yazidis and the Mandaeans and the Alawites who are being slaughtered by ISIS. Or I guess ISIS has equal, their morals and philosophy and scientific advancements are equal to the West, to Christendom, to Ethiopia, to the Christian communities of Goa in India. All right, peace to you.